Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles. I am live today on this beautiful, no more snow like yesterday, although I do like snow, but this beautiful day here on a lovely Wednesday. So if you're live, you could participate. If not, you're going to watch it on replay, and it still, of course, is going to be awesome. This one requires some backstory. This will be detailed. I'm going to give away more than I probably should. So some of you have noted, hey, Angelo, some of the videos I've seen up on X and YouTube and LinkedIn, it looks like you occasionally take about 20% of them down. Often because members complain a little bit that I'm giving away too much information for free. And I think sometimes they're right. So yes, there have been about 7 videos that I took down in about the last 2 or 3 months. This is probably going to be one of them. So I'm calling this Escape Velocity, the architecture of dynastic survival. I have been in this community for decades. I have traveled the world everywhere. I understand what it's like to be part of the ecosystem, specifically of billionaires and the single family office community. So a little bit of the backstory. Early during COVID, my most prominent consulting assignment, not my largest by monetary means, but largest by client monetary means. And this is a big, big, big one. And the concern was what ifs. And they hit perfectly in my alley because things relative to sovereign risk, from economic to societal, and really understanding history and traveling the world, I understand things are good one day and potentially bad the next. And that led me down an assignment that looks a little rudimentary how I outputted it about 4.5, 5 years ago now, but was the foundation for me diving deeply into a subject that, as I noted this week on some of my lives, I'm coming out with very early in 2026, sovereign risk and disaster preparedness for family offices, a subject they ignore way, way too much. So sure, I got active in Bitcoin and crypto, which I think, depending on the part that I got in early, worked out very well. And we all know I'm very active and 100% correct in AI now. But in between that was the issue of what if, what could go wrong, and understanding history, macroeconomics, and really people in psychology, and understanding the French Revolution, Russian Revolution. So many family offices believe they have time. I don't think they do. The world that created their wealth no longer resembles the one required to preserve it. Inflation, AI, sovereign risk, information warfare. I mean, these aren't just headlines anymore. So today, I'm going to start the presentation, which will be long form. And so I'm somewhat on track. I did take some show notes, so I am going to have to try. Sometimes I could totally ad-lib these, and sometimes to be a little more structured and not forget a couple of key points, I do have some show notes. I'm calling this the escape velocity, the architecture of dynastic survival. And I think it's one of the more complex, comprehensive, and most important subjects, which may be a little narrow to some. It's not. It really touches everyone that I ever covered. And on that note, without further ado, and you're getting a little bit of a glimpse, a small percentage of what that sovereign risk handbook and program masterclass is going to look like in early 2026. We are standing at really a civilization inflection point. And I don't think it's because of any one crisis, but really from where I sit and have researched this, multiple systems of order are kind of simultaneously approaching, kind of their failure threshold. The monetary architecture of the past century, the geopolitical balance that emerged, Bretton Woods, kind of post-World War II, humanity's monopoly on intelligence and self, like, don't you see this, are all entering their terminal phases. What I'm about to share, Mr. Optimism here, is I don't think it's a prediction. It really is more pattern recognition. The early signature of systemic collapse and the questions we must ask to kind of navigate what comes next. Now, I'm going to start with something that I have spoken briefly about before and did a program on maybe 2 weeks ago because it builds up into the story. I call it the Detroit paradox. Let me take you back to the wonderful city of Detroit. This will only be a small part of the presentation. 1955, the richest city per capita in America. Its automakers domineered global markets. Its workers, as blue collar, enjoyed really the highest wages in manufacturing history. And a short 20 years later, the system collapsed. What happened wasn't really suddenly catastrophic. It was something far more insidious. Success becomes the very mechanism of decline. So here's how the paradox works. Success generates resources, agreed? Resources create kind of insulation from reality. Insulation prevents adaptation. And the absence of adaptation, which is really, as we've learned from Darwin and others, the most important thing, that extended long enough becomes irreversible structural decay. Detroit's automakers stopped asking whether their business model was sustainable, and they stopped innovating. They negotiated unsustainable labor contracts because they could afford to, until suddenly, quote unquote, they couldn't. By the time the crisis became so visible, although it was visible even earlier, they elected to ignore it. But the city's fate was effectively already sealed. So, how do you know if you're inside such a paradox? I think there's kind of three signals. And again, my friends, I do have some show notes. First, when institutional memory replaces institutional learning, when you start executing rituals of past success rather than adapting to a present reality, when this is how we've always done it becomes the most dangerous sentence in your organization. Second, when financial engineering, this is a big one, when financial engineering replaces production of real value, when profits come not from creating goods and services, but from optimizing capital structures, tax arbitrage, monetary manipulation. So Detroit's automakers became more focused, they actually did, on financing car purchases than building better cars. Does that sound familiar? So third, when dissent is treated as disloyalty, healthy systems reward the questioner, the skeptic, the bearer of uncomfortable truths. Declining systems punish them. And you're telling me that many of the super rich and their family offices are not going through some of this now? Of course they are. So here's the most profound question facing any leader today. Like, are you building or are you merely defending? Because once defense becomes your dominant strategy, you're welcome, friends. You're already in the paradox. Now, this does transition. This is going to get interesting, my friends. Stay focused. Grab that lunch, coffee, Tang, Ovaltine. Does anyone still do that anymore? The age of intelligent machines. For 300,000 years, Homo sapiens possessed a monopoly on general intelligence. Every economic theory, every political system, every conception of human meaning assumed this monopoly would persist. The assumption is expiring expiring before our very eyes. We are not witnessing incremental automation. We are witnessing the emergence of really artificial general intelligence, systems that can reason, strategize, and create across domains without human supervision. And the implications cascade across every dimension of a human organization. A couple of weeks ago, I did my brief review of Gemini 3. Like, wow, if you know what you're doing and go to my masterclass and learn how to prompt and how to build out agents within that system, it is incredible, incredible. And what? ChatGPT launched 3 years ago. That's how much progress has been made. Economic moats are collapsing. Brand equity, scale advantages, proprietary data. These were, keyword there, valuable because they cannot be easily replicated. But when AI can analyze any market, optimize really any supply chain, and generate compelling content in like microseconds, my God, I got to start to use it from that perspective. I got to create, AI ads and things like that. Why am I behind the times? So what exactly cannot be replicated? The first mover advantage disappears when the second mover is a machine that learns in real time. Network effects erode when AI can build compelling networks overnight. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's never been a better time than right now to be an entrepreneur. But what replaces these traditional moats? You could argue there's kind of three. I guess you all like the things in threes. Three candidates. One, control of energy infrastructure. There is no question that is going to be huge. AI requires enormous computational power, which obviously requires energy. Energy is kind of converted into intelligence. So whoever controls cheap, abundant energy controls the substrate, again, of intelligence itself. Two, regulatory capture, kind of an ugly word. Regulatory capture and state partnership. If intelligence becomes commoditized, the only sustainable advantage is the ability to prevent the competition through law and state power. That's never happened before. And three, human trust and legitimacy. In a world where machines can, well, honestly, deceive perfectly, the remaining scarcity may be, and I hinted at this earlier in the week when I was focused on 12 things to look at in AI moving forward in 26, may be authentic human connection and the institutions that can preserve that. But the economic question pales, besides really an existential one. What is the purpose of human life when intelligence is no longer scarce? Every previous technology expanded human capability while leaving human agency intact. I mean, the steam engine amplified muscle, but required human direction. AI is the first technology that potentially replaces human judgment itself. We are witnessing humanity's obsolescence or its transcendence. The biological organism merging with its digital successor, the answer may depend entirely whether we maintain control of the alignment problem, debatable. Ensuring AI remains subordinate to human values even as it surpasses human intelligence. History offers no comfort here. Do you read Ariel and Will Durant in biology? Evolution doesn't preserve species that become redundant. I'm going to go with structure as like the next phase. Let's call this phase 3 of my conversation. Structure is everything. Now, let me tell you something most wealth advisors, they just won't say out loud. Kind of most families are asking these significant billion-dollar families kind of the wrong questions. Like, which country has low taxes? You should be asking, how do I ensure my capital survives the next 100 years, regardless what happens? And that becomes more of a sovereign issue, a country issue. I mean, broadly, some examples. The Rockefellers here in the US, I paid hundreds of millions of dollars in at least collective lifetime taxes, and they remain generation after generation billionaires for what, 5 generations now. The reason 90% of their wealth sits in dynasty trust that lasts, depending on the state here in the US, and that could be, situs could be adapted and changed, like 1,000 years, protected from creditors, from ex-spouses, protected from lawsuits, protected from estate taxes. They optimize for survival of capital. Again, they optimize for survival of capital across centuries and regimes, not simply tax rates. So structure is really kind of everything, not as much performance. Now, I may be playing the semantics game here, but definitely not tax optimization. It's a small part of it. Structure, the architecture that you hold and transfer wealth, determines whether it survives or evaporates when the system changes, and the system will change. Do you have an onshore plan and an offshore plan? The 50-year thinking within a family office, dynastic wealth has always required kind of 3 elements: capital preservation, power projection, I sound like the military now, and adaptive intelligence across the generations. The first 2 are kind of mechanical. The third is really civilization. Traditional family offices operate kind of on a 10 to 20-year time horizon. The lifespan of a changing of a generation, a trust structure, a patriarch's active involvement. But the families that endure the centuries, Rothschild, Medici's, Rockefellers, they think in way longer cycles. They understand that wealth preservation is not as much of a financial problem. It really is more evolutionary. And could I argue that the evolutionary challenge, so to speak, intensifies in this decade and the coming decade? Because consider the landscape. Monetary instability, well, that is the new baseline. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since the Fed, our central bank here in the US, creation in 1913. Read the book, The Creature of Jekyll Island. I did a huge video about that back in June. I think that one I also took down. The pace of debasement is accelerating. Deficits now exceed, what, 2 trillion annually, with no political will for correction. Modern monetary theory, the idea that governments can print without consequence, has become the implicit policy, regardless of which political party here in the US or elsewhere really governs. I mean, geopolitical fragmentation is replacing globalization. The 30-year experiment in frictionless global trade is ending. Supply chains are more and more reshoring. Energy independence is becoming more of an issue of national security, a priority to them. We're entering an era of regional blocks, industrial policy, strategic decoupling, particularly between the US and China. The return of ideology, for sure, as a political force. The end of the Cold War created an illusion, honestly, for the US and the West, an illusion that the traditional word of liberal democratic capitalism has permanently triumphed. It's not true. The illusion is shattering. Authoritative models are gaining more and more confidence. Western populations are, I think, losing faith in their institutions. The next 2 decades will see genuine ideological competition kind of return, not as rhetoric, kind of in competition, but competing visions of a social organization effectively backed by state power. So back to what I said about the 50-year in this environment, what does a 50-year family office require? Wow, where do I start? Why don't we do a layer of 3 yet again? 1, geographic and jurisdictional diversification, but not as portfolio theory suggests. The goal is not risk adjusted returns. No, no, no. The goal is sovereign optionality. More than just multiple passports, that plays into it. Residences in stable jurisdictions, assets and domains beyond any single government's reach. Good luck, but there's some unique strategies out there. The question every family must answer: if your primary nation, your nation state collapses or turns hostile, where do you go? And how quickly can you get there? Maybe a layer two. Hard asset allocation. I mean, this could get into a discussion of counterparty risk as well, but hard asset allocation beyond traditional portfolios. Real estate, sure, in stable, low density regions, energy production capacity, precious metals held physically, not as an ETF, a proxy, Bitcoin, for those who understand, quote unquote, its game theory and how do you hold it and own it. The thread connected to these assets, they exist theoretically independent of any government sovereignty. It's really more solvency or goodwill. Layer three. Intellectual and human capital as the ultimate inheritance. The families that survive civilizational transitions are those that cultivate capacity and capability, adaptability, literacy in multiple domains, and a temperament to act decisively when consensus is paralyzed, effectively becoming somewhat anti-fragile. It cannot be purchased, cannot be built through traditional education. You're kidding me. Not even mentorship or deliberate transmission of values across generations. So the central question: what are you building that will still matter when today's certainties become tomorrow's nostalgia? I know this is a long one. I got a while to go here. I talk about these things, and like some of you just rather hear other conversations. What could I say? I bring up the uncomfortable. A coming fracture. We are living through the largest monetary experiment in human history. Since 2008, central banks have created over, $25 trillion in new currency. Our debt to GDP ratio in most developed nations now exceeding the World War II levels, but without the post-war growth to justify it. This cannot continue indefinitely. The question is not whether the current system survives. Really, it's almost how it will fail and what could replace it. Listen, I don't have a crystal ball, and AI may end up solving some of these issues. But traditionally, two scenarios dominate. They're not good, my friends. The first one, kind of a controlled demolition. Central banks and governments engineer a managed reset, debt restructuring, currency kind of redenomination, and the introduction of central bank digital currencies, ta-da, that provide governments with unprecedented, especially, how they structure it, as unprecedented surveillance and control over any and all economic activity. This path preserves state power. They like that, while sacrificing individual financial privacy. Scenario two, the chaotic collapse. Confidence in fiat currencies evaporates faster than really any government can respond. Hyperinflation, or I could argue, deflationary spiral triggers bank runs. That would be a disaster. Supply chain breakdown, political instability, populations lose faith in institutions effectively entirely, leading to either authoritative crackdowns or fragmentation into smaller autonomous regions. I don't know. The likeliest outcome kind of probably combines some element of both. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. There's actions we could take, and AI might even in some ways, from the perspective I'm talking about, potentially be a savior. I actually think if we get through a certain phase, which is debatable because it may get rough before it gets better, it actually could be. So different nations and regions will experience different trajectories depending on their fiscal discipline, energy independence, and social cohesion. And layered on top of this monetary crisis is effectively US and China divergence. If China dominates, which they do, ship production, manufacturing, robotics, drones, energy infrastructure, physical manufacturing broadly, whoa, that's a lot. While America leads in software and AI, we're entering into an era of asymmetric dependence, unlike any other in modern history. And no, your banks and economists and your old people that don't understand this new world order, they're not getting this. America will control the intelligence layer. China will control kind of the physical substrate. This is not stable and probably not sustainable. Will likely resolve through maybe some form of confrontation, economic, technological, possibly kinetic. The question that every strategist must answer in a world where software eats the world, remember Mark Andreessen saying that? But China builds the world's hardware, like who wins? And most importantly, where do you want to be when the question gets answered? This segues into sovereign risk and escape velocity. The most dangerous assumption a family office can make is that the nation state protecting its wealth today will continue to do so tomorrow. I don't know about you. Do you study some history? It's littered with families who believed their sovereignty was permanent. It's permanent until it's not. The Romanovs, through their dynasty, they thought it was going to be eternal. The Kulaks thought their farms were secure. The Jews of Weimar Germany thought their prosperity was protected by law. In each case, the warning signs were visible years before that collapse. But here's the important part. The cost of seeing them was just too high because it meant abandoning everything that is familiar to you. Now that comes down to the essence of sovereign risk, the probability that the government, boy, they really love me, under which you operate can confiscate, devalue, they could easily do that, or destroy your wealth through policy incompetence, they're great at that, or malice. And we are entering into an era where sovereign risk is no longer an emerging market problem. It's a universal condition. 3 vectors of sovereign failure. The first is monetary confiscation through really bad economic policy that leads to inflation. So effectively inflation. When governments cannot tax enough to fund their promises, what do? Well, they print. Here in the US, 38 trillion in federal debt, 200 trillion in unfunded liabilities, and modern monetary theory now embedded in policy deeply across both parties. The next decade, how could it not see unprecedented currency debasement? This is not default by bankruptcy, it's default effectively by dilution. Your nominal wealth may remain intact, but your purchasing power evaporates. Now again, I don't have a crystal ball. This may happen to a lesser degree, and AI, with its enhancements to GDP, productivity, and a variety of factors, may inevitably help to be one of the solutions. But let's get back to the negativity. Second, political confiscation through redistribution, wealth taxes. The conversation with Biden's presidency, Kamala brought it up too, about taxing unrealized capital gains, estate tax increases. They're no longer theoretical. They're on the table. their active policy proposals gaining mainstream. As inequality widens and AI is going to, for a time, accelerate job displacement, the political pressure to reclaim concentrated wealth will intensify. The families who assume property rights are, you can't touch them, are making the same mistake, I guess, in what? The French Revolution that class made the aristocrat in what? 1789. Third, geopolitical confiscation through conflict. When great powers collide, private wealth becomes, well, kind of the collateral damage. Russian oligarchs discovered this recently in 2022, when the US, because again, settles in dollars and people in dollars, when Western sanctions froze broadly hundreds of billions in assets kind of overnight. No trial, no due process, just effectively executive orders. If the US and China enter genuine confrontation, any family with assets in either sphere may become vulnerable to overnight seizure. The Cold War playbook is returning, and it doesn't really respect your cosmopolitan neutrality, so to speak. So this goes back to the title of what I'm doing today. What's the answer? Is it escape velocity? Escape velocity is the minimum speed required to break free of a gravitational field. In the context of sovereign risk, it's the minimal level of independence required to survive the collapse of any single nation state. No, it's not about pessimism. It's actually really about physics. If 100% of your wealth, identity, and legal standing is tied just to one jurisdiction, you kind of have zero escape velocity. Really, like you're a passenger, not a pilot. And when the system destabilizes, like the passengers don't get to decide the outcome, I'll tell you that. So I'm back to the threes again. Building escape velocity requires three layers. Layer one, jurisdictional diversification beyond simply compliance theater. This is not just about having a second, third, or fourth passport strictly, although for US citizens, this would not be as optimal, but for tax optimization. It's about having genuine residency, legal standing, and social capital in multiple stable jurisdictions. The question is not where can I get a golden visa? The question is, if my primary nation becomes hostile or collapses, where can my family actually live, work, and rebuild, and how fast, and even if we could even get there? The families who survived the 20th century's upheavals, there were multiple, were those who moved early. The ones who waited for proof lost everything. And here's the asymmetry you kind of need to understand. And you're not really going to like it. Acting too early can cost you some money. Acting too late can cost you everything. Everything. The cost of being wrong is not symmetrical. That's the problem. Layer two. We hinted at this earlier, but asset uncorrelation from systemic risk. Traditional diversification assumes markets are independent, but 2008, relatively recently, taught us that in a liquidity crisis, all correlations, or near all, effectively go to one. Stocks, bonds, real estate, everything collapsed effectively simultaneously because everything was denominated in the same system. True uncorrelation requires assets that exist outside the banking system. You're going to hear this from your bank. Come on. Outside government databases, outside centralized points of failure. A single point of failure, one company CEO, one computer, boom, you unplug it like it's dead. You need physical precious metals as part of your allocation held in multiple stable jurisdictions, gold and others, silver, etc., copper, not allocated in accounts in major banks. How about physical possession in vaults you control? In countries, Switzerland being one, Singapore, the US, and others, I could argue Uruguay, Norway, a little bit of New Zealand, but I don't want to give all my secrets out. With lesser geopolitical risk. Bitcoin properly secured, not really on exchanges, not in custodial wallets. How about in cold storage with multi signature security that no government can access? Bitcoin's value proposition is not necessarily that it will outperform, it's that it cannot theoretically, or way more complex, be confiscated, frozen, or inflated. That's the big one, by decree. In a world where financial surveillance is total and capital controls, they are returning. That matters more than the upside, especially if you're already rich. How about also productive land and energy assets, farmland, forestry, water rights, energy production? Assets that could generate real value independent of financial markets. Empires rise and fall, but people still need what, well, as long as we have people, food, water, and power. Well, the machines are definitely going to need the power. The families who own the substrate of civilization outlast the families who own paper claims to it. Strategic businesses with geographic portability. Intellectual property, software, global brands, enterprises that can operate across borders and survive regime change. Contrast this with businesses dependent on local regulatory capture, government contracts, or kind of protected monopolies. The latter may be high returning until what? Until they're worthless. The layer three. We are the end is a little bit in sight. Stay with me. You're getting what my members get. So in 2 weeks, I am going to take this down. Layer three, human capital and network resilience. Capital is mobile. Connections are not. The families who preserve wealth across civilizational transitions are those who maintain relationships, that's important, across geographies, industries, and power structures. When borders close, when capital controls activate, when traditional channels freeze, like, who can you call? And someone's going to say Ghostbusters, of course. Who owes you a favor? Who trusts you enough to help when the institutions fail? This cannot be built in a crisis. It must be cultivated over decades and requires a mindset shift from thinking of yourself as a wealthy citizen of a nation state to thinking of yourself more as a sovereign entity that happens to operate within multiple nation states. Now, this could bring up the work of the network state by Balaji. Many of you are familiar with his work, especially in crypto. Related to that, we'll save that one a little bit for a different time. And we'd love to have him on the show, by the way. So here is the question every family office should be asking, but effectively none do. If the US freezes bank accounts, imposes capital controls, and even restricts an exit, as it has the legal authority to do under existing emergency powers. Look at Canada with the truck drivers. How long would it take your family to relocate, access alternative capital, and rebuild operations in, let's call it, a secondary jurisdiction? If the answer is months, or we haven't thought about it, that's always the answer. You have zero escape velocity. You have wealth that exists at the pleasure of a government. I'm going to say that again. You have wealth that exists at the pleasure of a government whose solvency, competence, and goodwill are all declining simultaneously. Listen, the American empire is probably not eternal. The dollar's reserve status is not guaranteed, although the stablecoin idea via the Genius Act is brilliant by the American government, by the way. The institutions that protected property rights for the past century are not immutable to laws of nature, and there are political constructs that can be altered or abandoned when The political will, which here in the US will happen in a couple of more years, changes. This does not mean America is going to collapse per se. It does mean the probability of systemic disruption is higher than at any point since World War II. Again, I could compare the US to other countries. Farmland, water, energy, oceans on both sides, massive advantages, controlling the capital markets, etc. Now, consider the families who thrived across history's inflection points. The Rothschilds survived the Napoleonic Wars by having operations, in London and Paris, Vienna, my good friends over there in wonderful Austria, Frankfurt and Naples. When one regime collapsed, which it did, it had others. The Sassoons left Baghdad for Bombay, expanded to Shanghai and London, always staying kind of one jurisdiction ahead of political instability. The Rockefellers, a different perspective, but diversified from oil into banking, real estate, and philanthropy, ensuring no single regulatory change could destroy their legacy. None of these families achieved permanence through sheer brilliance alone. They achieved it through redundancy, mobility, and the willingness, this is hard, to abandon sunk cost when the environment shifted. The families who failed, the ones whose honestly names we kind of no longer remember, are those who believed that their success was permanent. Their government was, of course, so stable, and their wealth protected by law. They were wrong, and they paid kind of the ultimate price, especially during aspects of the French and Russian Revolution, dynastic extinction. Think through this, the questions that matter. Let me leave you with the questions that form a foundation of strategic thinking for the next 10 years. No, these are not bullshit academic exercises. They're diagnostic tools I would do with my member families and institutions navigating the most complex transition in really modern history. One, recognizing systemic collapse. What early signals, through history being one lesson, tells you, have you watched some of Ray Dalio's work on the 5 elements that brings down governments? We're pretty late stage here. What early signals tell you a civilization or enterprise is already past the point of renewal? Ask that. For family offices, kind of the meta question is whether your own wealth preservation strategy is built on assumptions that are, how about this, already obsolete. But you can't see it yet because you don't want to see it and the money's still flowing. How can you recognize my earlier story of the Detroit paradox? You saw the Japanese coming, didn't do anything with it. How do you, the deceptive plateau where your success becomes your fragility? When did your family office last fundamentally question its investment thesis? Really question it. Not ass kissers that are agreeing with everything that you say. When did you last kill a strategy that was actually working, but it was time to say goodbye to it? If the answer is never, you are already in that paradox. So, other questions to think through. On the intelligence revolution, as AI overtakes human intelligence, do economic moats disappear entirely? For families with wealth concentrated in traditional businesses or public equities, this is existential for you. If AI commoditizes competitive advantage across entire industries, watch my solo from yesterday, by the way, across, I said, entire industries. Like, what in your portfolio survives? What happens to meaning and purpose when machines become the primary decision makers? This is not just philosophical. It's about how you're preparing the next generation. If your children's education is optimized for cognitive skills that machines have already but very soon for sure will blow away. What are you actually preparing them for? On civilization's kind of life cycles, where is America in the life cycle today? If America is in late stage decline, your 50-year strategy cannot assume American institutional continuity. Where is the next century of gravity for capital, innovation, and order? And are you already there? What inner rot worries you most about the US? It may not even be economic. It may be bifurcation of our society, our political parties, the lack of having respectful conversations. The families who preserve wealth across regime changes are those who see the decay. You got to see it before the collapse. What is your contingency plan if American institutions fail within your children's lifetime? Now, on a bit of the US and China imbalance, if China, and they dominate in drones, robotics, shipbuilding, energy, manufacturing. But like I said, the US does lead in certain things and has some wonderful advantages. But back to its leadership in software and AI, how will that imbalance kind of rewrite power and dependency? Strategic dependence is the precursor to geopolitical submission. Can America remain the hegemon of ideas if it loses control? At least it realizes it is and trying to do something on it, but loses control of production of energy and physical hardware. Sure, software is powerful, but requires hardware to execute, energy to power, and physical infrastructure to matter. If you control the operating system, but someone else controls the chip fabrication, like who really is in charge? On certain things, back to a foundation of wealth, real direct ownership, custody, gold, silver, precious metals, select real estate and farmland, multiple currencies, Bitcoin, stable coins, each kind of forming a new foundation of wealth in a world run by code and energy. Which of these endures? This is not about allocation percentages. It's about effectively a monetary paradigm you believe survives in the next reset. Your answer determines whether you preserve wealth or effectively, and it may be over time, but watch it evaporate. We're almost there. On generational traits, think 50 years, think 3 generations ahead. What traits will redefine families and nations that still matter in an intelligent machine civilization? And nothing is going to stop that. Capital alone probably isn't going to be enough. The families who endure are those that cultivate traits that maybe cannot be automated. Judgment under uncertainty. How about courage in chaos? The ability to transmit values, feelings, and love across generations. What are you building that, at least for the next couple of decades, we think that AI won't be able to replicate? On kind of elite legitimacy, are we approaching a new French moment where inequality and technology converge into chaos? Wealth concentration is kind of at the Gilded Age levels. AI will probably accelerate that further until it doesn't, but will we get that far? Populations are already losing faith in institutions. If you're part of the elite, what is your plan? Well, plan to be more beneficial in society and help this from not happening. But if it does, what is your plan if it collapses entirely? In closing, kind of the truth. The families and institutions that matter, I think in 2050, will not necessarily be those with the most capital today. It will be those with the clearest sight, the most adaptive strategies, and the courage to act on truths that others effectively refuse to see. The question is not whether change is coming. It always is. The question is whether you're ready, you're adaptable when it does. What did I say earlier? Acting too early can cost you money, but acting too late costs you everything, everything that matters to you. And I think the choice is yours. But for sure, that clock is running. Listen, this is just a little bit a foundation relative to the big picture issues that I've been thinking about, talking with my members about, and have complex masterclasses coming out. My members get it all. It's all inclusive. Others, as one-off, will have to pay for it. Now, this is going to go into a much deeper conversation about anti-fragility in the future, at least for members and the masterclass participants, a much deeper discussion on investing, and obviously a very deep discussion on understanding sovereignty, sovereign risk, and fluidity, what areas around the world are the best options. And again, the US, with all its challenges, and they are loaded challenges up the wazoo. We have tremendous land size, energy resources, water resources, incredible farmland, contract law, strong military, oceans on both sides. And like, here's capital markets effectively run through here in the US. And yeah, the dollar's weakening a bit from over 80% to like, what, 68, 69% of global settlements. But as long as the US dollar is still king, that's very, very powerful. And the US government will do anything and everything. And what they're doing with stable coins, I mentioned earlier, Trump's Genius Act, bringing those stablecoin companies here to the US, having them purchase treasuries, it is utterly brilliant. And it may buy another 10 or 20 years, who knows? But long term, that's not enough. There has to be a deeper purpose, a societal purpose. Countries need to have a unifying morality, a commonality in culture. And all this appears to be eroding. Listen, I'm not saying I'm brilliant, and I'm definitely not saying I have all the answers. I have more questions than I have answers. But I am talking about things that no one in the family office world talks about, either usually through ignorance and or fear. I don't have investors to answer to. I don't have a board. I don't need to be politically correct. And it's great. Probably it costs me some money long term, but that's okay. Actually, like I told many of you, at least half of my members that pay a five-figure sum. I mean, barely five figures, 10,000, but 10,000, still five figures. They have different internal philosophies and political perspectives than I do. They respect the intellect that I put behind it, the thought, the research, and causing them to think or challenge their ideas. I am not there to kiss their butt. And occasionally that does end up in time costing me a relationship or two. It cost me some this year. I can't change. Again, I have been pretty good at being future forward thinking. From Bitcoin and crypto, I know I'm correct about AI, but I've been on this issue of hedging your risk, how to do so, sovereign risk for a long, long time. And I have traveled the world. I put it to use in consultative assignments and relationships. You got the smallest glimpse today, and one that probably by the end of the year, I'm going to take down. I may do more truncated 10, 15-minute versions of it as a little bit of a more marketing pitch, but you got a pretty good deep dive today. And I don't know, to pay $10,000 to become a member, and this is like 0.5% of the content, the proprietary intellect that you're going to get, and that 24/7 connection to me and an incredible network and great thought leaders and introductions and deeper dives into subjects like this. You get my 5 days in Palm Beach, my 1 day in Miami, my week I'm going to be in LA the first week of May, what I do in New York, what I do in Vienna, Mexico, Middle East upcoming this year, my AI Family Office Masterclass revamped. It's incredible. what I have on sovereign risk and disaster preparedness, which this was a little glimpse of, and creating a top 1% family office, like this one-man shop, and back in my family office association days, yeah, it was a notch bigger. We were more of an institutional type organization. It's different now. It's intimate. And I'm outputting content. Forget about being likable or not. I'm outputting content that I just don't see. And I have respect for certain people in the community. Like, where are they on AI? Like they feel like they're decades behind. They're not talking about geopolitical issues, sovereign risk, US debt, Trump, the good and the bad. The issues that I'm talking about here. Like, this is where you go for real conversations, for real connections. And I got something going on practically every month. Like, one of the things I have for my members is I actually don't think they use me enough. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I got to be one notch more proactive with them because we all get busy. And then I see them once or twice a year when I should be seeing them 6-7 times a year. So I know it's like, hey, it's not late in the day, so I'm doing it live. I'm a little more energetic than probably normal at like midday. And wow, I've been going on for, is it almost an hour now? I mean, I had a lot to go over today. And again, I'm going to hear some stuff from members like, Angelo, we pay to be a member for exclusivity. You're giving away, I'm giving a little bit of a glimpse. I admit that, probably more than I should. And I know this is not going to be permanent because I'm not going to leave it up permanently. But I wanted to share with you, for those of you who are heading to the end of the year, or maybe you watch this after the first of the year, really doesn't matter too much if it's even up, or maybe I do bits of it that will be. This is an opportunity for you to go to angelorobles.com, my website, and be a part of my intelligence and strategy community. It's called SFO Continuity, a private club of incredible families. And this is a tiny glimpse of some of the information and connectivity that you get. And we got so much going on face-to-face upcoming in 2026. Early, Miami's going to be in January. We're going to kick off the year with some incredible content at the beautiful Ritz-Carlton. This is it. We got to go. You got to become a part. And MFOs, I got love for you too. I'd rather you be a founder or a partner, not there to sell, but to get value and provide value back. And a lot of what I talk about, including these topics today, what an edge you would get. And what I could do for you in AI, like I could spin your head around and make a huge impact. Single family office, multifamily office, hybrid, virtual, it doesn't matter. So this is actually a good time of year to reflect, a good time of the year to put in your thoughts into getting off to a strong start, enhance your AI capability, understand risks where they are that others aren't seeing, and be prepared. And the work that I do in membership, consulting, in masterclasses is very, very unique in the industry. So I hope you all enjoyed it. It's been a very active live week for me. If you didn't hear my prior to, the one on Monday, which is still up now, I did kind of 12 things to look forward to in AI in 2026. Yesterday, I broke down the investment framework that me and others look at from an investment policy statement, asset allocation, and thesis around individual public stocks within a portfolio, and how the AI era has adapted some of that. And I broke that down in pretty good detail. Tomorrow, I think I will do something. I have an idea where maybe I will go a little bit around the world in varying countries as a little bit of a quasi part 2 of today, sharing insight into various areas as primary domicile or others. And I just have so much content. Have some great guests coming on. December will be very, very busy, even the week between Christmas and New Year. Got a couple of surprise guests coming on, from investments to geopolitics to broadly family offices. I'm open-minded to feedback, to suggestions, to introductions. Bring it on. Email is angelo@angelorobles.com. Website again, angelorobles.com. Join, become a member, be part of a special community. And within a couple of weeks in Miami, you'll be in person with incredible people. And what you got today, if you stayed with me, was just a little glimpse. And again, no one else in the community is giving you this level of content. I appreciate all of you. And those of you that enjoy the free content, it's my pleasure to provide value and give back in the community. There's a couple of comments. All tribes, leaders, no, it will not be controlled or shall be okay. That's going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's okay. I'd rather have all sorts of comments than none. Energy should be everything. Yeah, like what AI is going to do to energy effectively with fusion and to labor is bring the cost down effectively to zero, near zero. That does mean capitalism as we know it effectively will change. Is this going to happen tomorrow, next year, the year after? No. Is it relatively on the horizon? Yes, I think so. So these are deeper discussions that revolve around society, socialism, capitalism, and how things are changing and how to be a part of the positive change and how to prepare and get the best out of it. That's another value that I'd like to believe that my members receive. And some of these things I can't talk overly publicly about. They're very, very, some would say controversial. And I would just say I have people that pay me and they deserve exclusivity relative to me not talking about everything being public. But these are some good questions. Adrian, not a bad job today, my friend. Adrian, we work in the world. Well, the world is dying. I mean, we could go back to various points in history and people were probably saying the same thing. And maybe I'm a little over the top with some of the challenges that I noted. The world that created the wealth doesn't resemble the one that's here now that's going to be required to preserve it. AI. I mean, we got nuclear capability in multiple countries, the war between the US and China cold, the advent of AI that's going to be the most intelligent, quote unquote, thing on earth, and the impact that's going to have on society. Now, we could get deeper into a religious perspective and others, and you can make the argument the world appears to be fading away from one that as individuals, we have free will, countries developed good ones like the US, a unifying morality and culture, and is that becoming more bifurcated and challenging? But as opposed, like, what's your solution to it? What are you doing within yourself, your family, your community, and on a deeper level to help make a positive impact? I get it. There's 8 billion plus people in the world. You're just one, but it's got to start somewhere. The best way to eat an elephant is you have to start simply one bite at a time. Someone again referenced my Tang reference. I know I'm giving away my age with that one. Hey, who doesn't love the astronauts? Late 60s, Tang came out, like a month, a day, a year later. Man, I was all on top of that sugary drink, the flavor. I probably had diabetes when I was a kid. All the bad stuff I was taking back then. Rise, look at views. Yeah, we got some winners in the comments today. Let's see if there's any more. Okay, I think that relatively is about it. So a little bit unique today. I hope you enjoyed it. I know you're going to go to angelorobles.com and learn more and just jump in and be a part of it. I hope you're having an awesome December. I am here for you. Reach out to me, angelo@angelorobles.com. Follow me in social medias. I'm at FamilyOffice on X and YouTube. You'll find it. Reach out, DM. I appreciate you. Thank you all so much and have a great remainder of the day. Thank you.